With the introduction of the traitor in the Broken Silence update, there is a series of conversations that are offered by the traitor after introducing himself to the survivor character. These first conversations not only offer some important information about the traitor, but they also confirm details about post-collapse island life as well as the events surrounding the first flare. Before I continue, please make sure to comment, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so I can keep making these videos.
We're really out on the edge of it all, ain't we? Some people do well with it. Others go a little crazy. Still others go out in the world looking for crazy. Maybe that's you.
The traitor is correct when saying that everyone out here was crazy. Literally everyone in Wintermute is a degree of crazy, with some much more than others. It takes crazy to live in such a hostile and desolate place. The lore notes and buffer memories across the entire game point to this conclusion as well. You have to be willing to accept the island life in order to live on it. Some adapted quickly while others struggled until they reached their breaking point. It's why there are so many more depressing stories within the lore than there are stories of perseverance. You have to be crazy to live on Great Bear Island.
Just a survivor. Like you, I guess. But I think you might not be from around here. You sound a bit different. Like those folks who wandered into town last week. No, that's wrong. It was a long time ago, wasn't it?
As expected, the traitor is a survivor just like the survivor character. He notices that based on our voice, that we, the survivor character, are not from Great Bear Island. Obviously, the player character doesn't have voiced lines here, but the survivor characters are canonically Will or Astrid. Although, I'm not so certain whether that is canon anymore considering the teaser poster for Wintermute Episode 5 and what might happen at the end. We might not canonically be Will or Astrid in survival mode, but the traitor pegging us as outsiders may indicate the opposite. There are other outsiders mentioned in the game and lore outside of Wintermute protagonists, but let's just assume we are playing as Will or Astrid for this video. He mentioned something about outsiders coming into town last week. Like I mentioned in the intro video to this series, we don't know how far into the future survival mode is. I'd like to imagine last week is still after the world ended. Regardless of this, he seems to have misremembered when it happened. Clearly though, he recognizes us as mainlanders.
I know the coastal regions best, but I've been around most of the island. Everyone's gone as best I can tell. Something big happened. Historical-like, I guess. One for the books, my brother used to say.
The traitor is definitely a local, as he seems to be a resident of the house on Misanthrope's Island, or at least the owner of the docks there. He also has a lot of experience exploring the coastal areas of the island. Even he can tell that something big has happened since the other locals seem to be gone.
Well, most folks try and avoid them. Look, I try to keep an even keel and an open mind. But I can't stand a backstabber or a liar.
The traitor more or less confirms what we know about the islanders and their opinions on mainlanders. They are usually despised and ignored. The collapse played a huge part in creating a political division among the islanders where some would continue to support mainland Canada and the others would live independent lives. In general, mainlanders are not well received on Great Bear Island, and the traitor even refers to them as liars and backstabbers. Historically though, the locals have had some unfair opinions of outsiders and mainlanders for a long time. These views on outsiders were only exacerbated by the collapse, as the islanders were essentially abandoned and cut off from the rest of the world. I think this also ties into the whole trust thing that seems to be a running theme across the game. In particular, it is a running theme in Wintermute Episode 4, where Will needed to trust Franklin and Jace in order to stop Mathis. Here, the trader is asking to trade with the survivor character but demands trust. This plays into the actual trading system, which will eventually unlock better items to trade and new conversations to hear. There are many instances of trust playing a role within the story and lore of the game, including times where it has been broken. Trust is key in these dark times, especially when things were already so grim before the end of the world.
Everyone gets a name, right? I had a name. Sutherland. Yeah, that's it. Sutherland. Whew. I need to wake up. Loopy tonight. What was it you said?
This is where I have to mention that the trader, Sutherland, is throwing out red flags left and right. Those red flags are something I will discuss at the end of this video. He seemingly forgets what his name was and struggles to say it. He admits he felt tired, but I believe there is more to this.
An old system, meant to keep folks connected, whatever that means. I never had much use for them, even out at sea. Just throw me overboard. That's how I... This one time... Lost it again. Never mind.
What seemed like Sutherland's interpretation of the purpose of the radio turned into more red flags. He confirms that he likely didn't have one before because he never had a need for one. He most likely had to find and repair one or build one from scratch. What I find so alarming is his sudden change in conversation, which he seems to forget entirely before he can get to the point.
I have my ways, even from my boat. Stuff's just floating out here. Containers, even some empty, drifting ships. Just gotta find it first.
Having a functional boat gives Sutherland a rare advantage, which allows him to search for and gather supplies lost at sea. From floating containers to drifting ships, he is able to salvage the supplies he's offering for trade.
Yeah, I don't walk too good at all anymore, thanks to this driftwood I call my leg. But out here on my boat, I do just fine.
Sutherland has a bad leg, preventing him from walking well. His advantage with his boat likely is the only reason he is still alive at all. On land, he would have likely died to the elements or to predators with his bad leg.
World's a cold place. Trust comes slowly. You keep your word, I'll keep mine. Don't know what it was like for you before, but that's how I deal. Straight up. Too much for you?
Circling back to the topic of trust, Sutherland says it is how he deals with other people. It takes a lot of trust to work with complete strangers, hence why the trades take place at a distance. He even acknowledges the survivor and how their method of dealing with people might be different. Regardless of how the survivor did it, they had to do it Sutherland's way.
I had to get to sea. As soon as the lights showed up, or a bit after, there was a storm and I couldn't get offshore. Can't really tell you why. But what's it to you anyhow? What are they saying, the others?
His statements here track with what we already know about the night of the first flare. There was a storm as Will and Astrid flew to Great Bear Island. Unfortunately, we don't see what happens after they crash because Will sleeps through the night and Astrid's perspective isn't shown. But if you watch the very beginning of the Wintermute episode 3 trailer from 2019, you can see a glimpse of her perspective after the plane crash. As she is running through the town of Milton and making her escape to the tunnel, we can see it is still storming. So Sutherland tried to get to sea right after the first flare, but couldn't get offshore. I'm not sure why when it looks like his boat moves around with a sail instead of electronics and an engine. I do believe this confirms that he lives on Misanthrope's Island because the first flare was in the middle of the night. What would he have been doing in the middle of the night at the docks? Unless he is a fan of nearly freezing to death and exposure to the elements, he most likely lives at this house on the island. Misanthrope is defined as despising humankind, so it somewhat tracks with Sutherland's character. It seems that he is a lone wolf. The last line I couldn't decipher, but may be important for the conclusion of this video.
Who ain't alone in this life? Suits me fine. I'm still breathing. That's good enough for me. We all get to tell our own stories, right? This is mine.
The final conversation after his initial call over the radio leads us into his personal story, but this is where trust comes in handy. In order to hear more, we must gain his trust. This is where trading is required to unlock his secrets. Besides this, he doesn't seem to mind the loneliness. A lot of the characters in Wintermute deal with this in some way. Grandmother and Jeremiah are lone wolves too, but definitely make cases for avoiding loneliness. Sutherland is happy as long as he is alive, which I can see as somewhat of a lesson we can all learn from in such a consumer-based world. Of course, happiness is a complex beast. Now that I've covered these initial conversations, it's time to talk about the red flags that I mentioned. First, I want to start by saying that Sutherland is definitely old. His vocabulary, manner of speaking, voice, and his bad leg suggest this. There are a few other things about him that suggest he is old, but these are the red flags that I'm worried about. On screen are the 3 particular lines that I want to highlight from across these initial conversations. To summarize what I'm seeing here, these red flags are displaying a familiar pattern. This pattern is something we have seen in the game in 2 different instances. This trader is also being introduced in the same expansion that introduced us to one of these instances. Do you understand what I'm insinuating here? It is plain as day that Sutherland is exhibiting signs of the outbreak that has occurred not once, but twice on Great Bear Island. Which instance he was exposed to, either the Langston mine or Perseverance Mills version, is not known. You could chalk this up to old age and any number of memory-related conditions that come with age, but the signs are there. In addition to these 3 red flags within these conversations, he is also spending a lot of time out on the water. Even before the first flare, it seemed that he spent a lot of time out in his boat exploring the coastline of Great Bear Island. Water has a strange connection to both instances of the outbreak. In general, both outbreaks display overlapping symptoms which revolve around the mind, issues with sleeping, and a strange fixation on water by the victims. At this point, I would highly recommend you familiarize yourself with both outbreaks because I have a feeling it will be important for the rest of Sutherland's tale. The videos I recommend you watch, which I will link in the description, are what is the Langston mine outbreak, what is the Perseverance Mills outbreak, and the significance of water in the tales. I will also throw in the Who is Sam and What Happened to the Foreman videos as optional because they offer examples of victims of the Langston mine outbreak from outside the Tales trilogy. Do note that all of these videos have heavy spoilers for the entire Tales trilogy and side quests from Wintermute episode 4. For the time being, I must continue trading with Sutherland in order to unlock more of his secrets and knowledge. Building trust is key to revealing what he is hiding. If you haven't caught up on the story of Wintermute, I would highly recommend it. On screen are the core videos for the Wintermute episode 3 and 4. You can also find all the different playlists for the story and lore of the Long Dark in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to comment, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so I can keep making them.